So welcome back, Andy Dufford, and welcome everyone to our design discussion with Andy for the South Houghton Road project. And I will turn it over to Andy. He's co-host, so he can pull up anything he needs to.
Okay. Well, yeah, thank you for being here. And in particular, thanks for the November meeting, and the opportunity to be there was fantastic. I want to just go back and talk a little bit about what I heard over the last several months and what I saw, because that became the basis for the design. You know, when we met in October, Cindy said something that really stuck with me. She said, people choose Corona de Tucson to get out of the city, to get out of the business. You know, they drive to work and they come home to relax. And at that same meeting, JJ said, people like open space and being close to nature. It's a part of who we are. And certainly when I was out there, I understood that at a much deeper level, right? As I drove south to Corona de Tucson, you know, I sort of fell in love with that landscape, and it's an extraordinary place to be. And the other thing JJ said that stuck with me at that meeting was, she said, you know, South Houghton Road is really the gateway to Corona de Tucson. And I think, you know, on that October meeting, we talked about sites, and it was really all of you who came up with that idea of that curve being something special. You know, you're for the most part either bombing straight south or straight north, and the curve brings you in to yourself. And I can't remember who said it at the November meeting, but somebody said, you know, sometimes you get so stuck in driving that you need to look up and reconnect with the landscape. And so that to me was sort of tied to what JJ said about some sort of gateway element that would reconnect you. Like, okay, you're off the interstate, you're coming home, or vice versa. As you go up to work, it's sort of that sense of, all right, you're transitioning back up into that world. The other thing, in October, Jared talked a lot about the views, and certainly the views are incredibly unique. And he was the one who told me, you know, make sure you get here at sunrise and sunset. And certainly that was very true. And Rod also tied open space to activity. He talked about how it's not just a passive enjoyment of the outdoors. It's a real connection where you're moving out and into those environments. And so that is all a part of why people live there and how they live there. At the November meeting, and also when I met with the students, they were fantastic, talking about all the critters that they had seen coming and going to school and being at school. You know, folks said there's an amazing array of wildlife, but also at the November meeting, it was reinforced. Consider the native peoples, the sunrises, the moonrises, the cactus, the ranching history, and sort of that long history of connection to place and interdependence. And the Houghton and the Tohono O'odham had this completely integrated way of living in the land. But, you know, even when the original Baptist settlement was created, it was that idea of come live in God's country. So it was an invitation to come live in the beauty of that place. So all of that went into the stew pot. That's what got me dreaming about what we might do. So I'm going to share my screen and take you through some images. Sort of, this will help you understand our design process. And sometimes my eye view is a little fussy, so you let me know if my slides are advancing. So can you see that slide of the curved site? You're
You can
not,
see the
Were
whole
you gonna
slideshow.
put these in a slideshow? They're all together.
okay, then I'm gonna do it another way. And that's what I was concerned about is
Okay.
it'll be a little less graceful, but it'll work this way. How about now?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
So there's our site, right? And again, I think it's really interesting that the rest of the road is on that north-south axis. And here you make that slight shift. And you sort of, when we go back to that comment of you need to look up and reconnect with the landscape, I think this is what was sort of brilliant about your choice of the curve. Is the curve is a moment when you do that, both when you're headed south and headed north. Let's see, get this to advance. So here's a northern view on that curve. So again, there's this deviation that really sort of wakes you up. And so I began to think about all that we talked about, and I thought, okay, could we make some sort of threshold here, something that both connects us to the place and sort of marks our entry and our exit into this special landscape. And, you know, you just cannot be there without being completely taken by the desert light. You know, Jared was not the only one who said it, but everything about the desert is about the light. You know, these extraordinary sunsets. You know, when I was out at Colossal Cave, that picture on the lower left there of the saguaros, you know, you're out sometimes, and particularly in the winter, you get everything is illuminated. It gets backlit. And because of the character of the vegetation, you know, you just get this halo around everything. And next to that is a shot of when I took my hike in Seneca Creek. And it's the same thing, you know, it's just this radiant desert light everywhere you are. And so I really thought, you know, is there a way that we can not just represent that light, but to use that light, that the sculpture or the artwork in some way would be illuminated by the desert. And then the other thing that really got me going was when folks mentioned the moon rises. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be extraordinary to do something not only with the sunsets, but with the moon? And is there any way that this thing could mark the passage of the moon? And so that's actually where I started. First I called the observatory out there, and they're sort of closed down for COVID. But there's an astronomer here in Denver associated with the Museum of Nature and Science here. And he agreed to meet with me, and he said, yeah, I think I can teach you about the lunar cycles. And so I went and met with Kachun, and he talked me through how the path of the moon works from lunar standstill to lunar standstill. And it's an 18-year cycle. And I thought, well, you know, that may be a little too long of a point of observation. And the moon is complicated because it's an orbiting body orbiting an orbiting body. And so it becomes more complex. But I still thought, okay, there's the potential to maybe use the sun in a similar way. And I came across a couple of different things. The astronomer pointed me to this notion of a horizon calendar, which is what you're seeing in the lower left here. This is a Hopi horizon calendar, but you know, depending on where the sun is at any given point during the year, you can sort of mark where you are in the year. And prior to clocks and calendars, that's the way people understood, like, is it time to plant the crops or not? And so I thought, well, now that's really interesting, some sort of solar calendar. And I came across this in the upper left. You're seeing this Hohokam solstice glyph, which is really quite extraordinary. This is a petroglyph on a rock. And on the summer solstice, this ray of light aligns with that glyph of the sun. And I thought, now that is astonishing. And it tells you about a people that were deeply connected to place. And I also came across this Tohono O'odham calendar of the year. And it's lovely because it talks about, they've given the moon a name for each time of the year. And then if you dig deeper into that calendar, that name is tied to what's going on, what's blooming, what's going into hibernation, whatever that might be. But again, taken as a whole, it's this beautiful map of interdependence in the desert, how things move through the seasons. And so I thought, okay, maybe there's a way that we can use the sun to make a solar calendar of this place. And we can begin to take that content, both natural history and potentially human history, and we can use our marker to help us understand how we're moving through the year in the desert. And so that was my first idea. Can we have some sort of marker, and that the sun interacts with that marker to enliven us to what's going on around us in the desert? And that gets pretty specific, right? Because it's a particular place at a particular latitude, and the sun has a predictable and not totally complex, but it's a very prescribed path. And so when Donna and I were out on the curve side, I dropped a pin and we took those coordinates and we took it into the modeling program. And you're seeing the old road. So where I dropped the pin is actually on the west side of the new road. And then we located that in the celestial dome. And each one of these figure eights is a month out of the year, the path of the sun over the course of 8 hours through the year. And so we could get some fairly precise information about that. The problem of working with the computer, though, is the computer, in order to build complex forms, it's a fairly complex process. And so I wanted something more organic where we could work manually. And so what we did is we used this model of the solar dome to create a map of the site. And that's what you're seeing down below. And Aden is the sun. And each one of these lines on our map represents a month of the year. And then we had these big protractors that told us how high the sun was in the sky. And then we started experimenting with forms. We were trying to come up with a form that would capture the sun differently at different times of day and different times of the year. And you'll notice that we have 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. as sort of key markers. And that's because of the commute. I'm thinking of lots of folks going north in the morning and coming south in the evening. And not that that's the only thing that happens, but I was certainly out there at those times and I saw a lot of folks on the road at those times. And so I thought, okay, there's an opportunity. We know we've got an active audience at those times. Now, of course, the sun is dynamic and a good sculpture will be dynamic, and it'll do much more than something just at 8 and just at 5 p.m. But those are important times, I think. So, our first efforts were very rudimentary, and we were just trying to understand how forms would interact with the path of the sun. And then we began to refine these flat cardboard models into a more sophisticated sculptural form. And something like this up in the upper left-hand corner, this has nothing to do with the place. One of the things that Jared said in October, he said, context is everything. And that's a very astute observation. And so whatever this gateway solar calendar is, it needs to feel like it's always been there, like it's an artifact of the desert that has been there for a long, long time and will be there for a long, long time. And so as we began to refine that form, I went back to that notion of how are things shaped in the desert. And in particular, I looked at the plant life. And so we began to come up with this sort of quintessential tapered leaf form. And it has these sort of scalloped edges like the edge of a cactus leaf. And, you know, it becomes this thing, this artifact in the desert. And it's made of both stone and metal. So you see this stacked stone here. Here's the shoulder of the road. And you see this stacked stone, and you see that it's sizable. This, to the top of the stone element, it's 16 feet tall. So that seems really huge. And we can look a little bit later at the approach as you approach that in a vehicle. But again, I said to you when we met in November that we have to be able to absorb this thing going 35 miles an hour, because that's how most people are going to experience it. So that's the scale. And, you know, the materials echo the palette of the desert. They're quiet tones. And what you see here going up the side, and this is just an example, this is not our final content, but you see that the metal is perforated, so that as the sun moves across the sky, those images get cast onto the stone, or they get cast into the oculus. And I'll show you a couple of videos that explain how that could be a monthly marker, because at different solar angles, things show up in different places. And so all of a sudden, you know, we've all had that experience in the desert, right? Ever present, never twice the same. It's never the same. And so I think there's a real echoing of that dynamism within the sculpture itself. So here we see that same image in context. So we're looking at it along the road here, and you can see, again, bike path, southbound, northbound. And so in this context, you really understand that 16 feet tall isn't that tall. And then, you know, the fin's getting up into the 20-foot range. But if you're over here in the other lane, you're looking across at it, at the other side of it. So it's really key to think about being able to hold that space, regardless of which direction you're going. And I'm open to putting something on the other side. I haven't done any budgeting on this piece yet. And I would like to have some simple anchor stones on the other side that would really bracket both sides of the road. And we can certainly explore that as we get deeper into the refinement of the piece. Let's see here. So just for comparison, this is a piece that we did for a park. And, you know, this woman is just shy of 6 feet tall. And so you can imagine that this is roughly an 18-foot tall monument. So it gives you some sense of scale. And it also gives you a similar sense of the way this is painted metal. I wouldn't recommend that we use painted metal. I like that monotone. But in the case of the stone, the piece is big enough that it'll have to be made out of stacked stone. And so, of course, we can refine and carve stacked stone just as we can carve a single piece. So that's a little bit of what that might look like in terms of scale. And then here's the view as you're headed north. And again, you're seeing how both that oculus and the fin create opportunities for seasonal change. You know, sometimes you'll see through that oculus. Sometimes the light will go through that oculus. And same with these windows in the fin. These windows in the fin, if they're carrying imagery, they're going to stretch imagery across that face at different times of the year. So just so that you can get a sense, and I'll show you some videos here in a moment, but here we've got this same view of the southern face as you're heading north. And here is what it looks like. Here's what the shadows look like at 8 a.m. in December. Here's what they look like at 8 a.m. in March. And you see that shadow from the fin up above coming down below. Hang on just a second. I got a wild dog. I got to rein in here. My apologies. And then you can see in June, you get these very, very long shadows. Similarly, we're looking now at the northern face down below here, and you can see at 5 p.m. in December, we're getting long shadows across this face. In March, they begin to move, they begin to recede across the stone, but oh, look what's happening in the oculus. The projected images from this fin begin to move into the oculus. And sure enough, in June, the projected images from this fin, sorry about that, recede completely, and the oculus is decorated with everything that's going on in June. So it's totally possible for us to allow this thing to speak about the seasons depending on where images land and what the images are. So there's this interface between both things. So here is a video of 5 p.m. heading south, and this is taking you through the seasons. This is a dynamic move. We're starting in December, moving out to June, and moving towards, or we're starting in January rather, moving out to June and coming back to December. So you'll see that movement. If I can get my video to. Here we go. All right, so as we move towards the spring, watch this shadow recede. Watch this projection begin to decorate the interior of the oculus. And notice the subtle shift across the top of the gateway. And then as the days start to get shorter again, the same thing happens and the images on the interior face go away. And these images become more pronounced. So that's a full season as you're heading home. So let's look at one view from 8 to 5, because of what I said is it's not just about the commute. It should be interesting throughout the day. So right now we're looking at that same view heading south, but this is from 8 to 5. So early in the morning, we've got this very strong illumination. we've got this ambient glow inside of the oculus. The back of this fin is being illuminated by that ambient glow. We've got a big highlight across the top. And then all of a sudden our shadows arrive here. And we begin to see this illuminated from the back. So these images become highlighted from behind. And then look at that. They start to project their images onto that face. And again, this is in December from 8 to 5. And let's look at a similar reach of a day as you're heading north. So this is June. And remember, I talked about these windows here, as well as the oculus, showing us different things. Oh, sorry about that. It's a little fussy when I do it this way. So let's just watch. Again, this is over the course of a day. Watch those move. This, whatever would be up here would be projected longer. You see the change. And then watch what happens over on this side as that side becomes illuminated. And if you were standing over here, you'd be looking at those images in the fin highlighted all along this edge as the sun comes across that back. So what are the possibilities for what might be our content? Well, I found this fantastic book that talks exactly in more detail, and they actually use the Tohono O'odham calendar as a part of the context for this. But this book by the Hansons moves month by month through the season. And it talks about what the plants are doing, what the animals are doing. It talks about the weather. It talks about the constellations. It's just a fantastic resource of thinking about how you move through the year. And so that's what we see. You know, we see that the fin and the images that it projects would be tied to those studies that we've done. You know, if this is where the shadow lands in December, well, we would dig into December and we'd figure out what's going on in December. And this could include human history as well. You know, those images that are most prominent in December are the ones that would land here on this December face. So it becomes this really interesting timepiece. And it has to be done at a scale. Again, you're going to be driving. So this thing needs to be a road sign, but it's a road sign that changes. And it's a road sign that is cluing us in to look deeper into the environment. So here's a little movie of what that looks like over the course of a day. And what I want you to see is how the images stretch. And so one of the things that we can do is we can have some images that when they're stretched out, they don't make any sense. But on their magic day, they constellate beautifully as a particular image. Those are called anamorphic images. So I think there's, as we get deeper into refinement, that's a possibility. So here I just want to give you a couple of shots so that we understand the 16 feet. This is, I'm just going to move through these. This is heading north. We're just going to drive up closer, 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 and there we are adjacent to it. So that gives you a sense of what it might be like if you were traveling in a vehicle. And here it is heading south. Remember that what's the edge of the road on this image is no longer the edge of the road. The edge of the road is over here. And then we go closer, 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 closer. And we're up on it. So that gives you a little bit of sense of scale. And with that, I'm just going to pause and sort of open it up. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, and I can always pull the images back up. But that's where we went. And so the first question would be, is in general, have we been pursuing the right track? You know, it's possible that I was over here doing my thing and I missed the mark. So the first question would be, before we get into specifics, does this feel like the right direction for the artwork?
This is Cindy.
Yeah,
I like the height for that space. I think the materials also I think they would fit in with the landscape. I like the idea of capturing the sun. We have a lot of it here, so
yep.
except for today, it's raining the one time for February. But I like it overall.
And how about that idea of using it as a way to speak to the seasons, you know?
This is JJ.
Yeah.
I really like this. It celebrates the landscape, but also the plants, the animals, the human, all those things that are connected through the landscape. You know, every place's story is really written by the landscape, whether we consciously acknowledge that or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think this sculpture, the direction you're going, really captures that idea and is engaging. And it's dynamic, which I really like.
Excellent. Matthew.
Yes, yeah, I really like it. I think your choice of materials is really nice. Getting into the details more with it, it'll be interesting what type of rock or what those materials specifically are, but I like in general the rusted metal and the rock sounds like it be a good fit. I like the form of the sculpture. I like that it's drawing on natural forms, but it's not literal. I think that's really nice. And yeah, I like how what you've proposed as far as making it a gateway potentially, where it could be potentially there could be something on the other side, but maybe it would be a much smaller, simpler version.
Yeah.
But rather than doing two mirror images, I like that if something like a gateway were to happen, it might not be symmetrical.
Yeah.
Tony, would you like to weigh in? I don't know if you're on or not. Oh, here you are. Hi.
And the mute button here real quick.
No, okay.
No, I think it's a great concept for this area. I really appreciate the whole solar calendar and look forward to seeing how the images and times of the year could progress with this.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Tony, now that you see it, you think we're good there?
Yeah, and I mean, really, your positioning of the piece, directional, is more important than exactly where. So I think we're good no matter where we are right there. But
Okay.
if it needs to be, 15 feet further south, 15 feet further north, or
Yeah.
east and west, it's less of a deal to where I don't foresee there being any issues anywhere we want to put it.
Right.
But I don't think your piece is really that dependent on exactly so far off that path to where we can work around it. And you did get my email about the one line just being for their
I did.
their
The cut
grading.
and fill lines. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like we're good and
Yeah.
don't have to worry about any utilities there. We
Great.
will have to get a 811 411 call to make sure, of course, but I don't foresee any issues with it.
Mhm. Great. All right. Aiden, did I forget anything?
I'm gonna mute myself. No, I think you covered it pretty well. Yeah, I mean, I think that the things that really draw me to this piece is I think the solar elements are something special. When we were working on this, we really focused on those two times of the day, that 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. And, we also had a 12 p.m. time bracket, and those were really the accurate points when we were looking at those shadows and how the sun interacts. And so, I think that's really something special for people who are going to be on those roads, heading to work, heading away from work. They're going to get a little bit of variation, one through the day and through the year. And I think that was just one thing that really draws me and inspires me. And so, yeah, just underline that. And I think, it's going to grow as well as we really get into the research around the flora and the fauna that are, present during each season. It's only going to grow deeper. And I think, we're just going to be able to bring more content onto the surface of the form and those fins and elements as well. So.
And I would like to check in with Cindy and JJ. Do you think, is it wise to think about that commuting window? Is that realistic?
I think it is. I drive that road. I don't drive it at 8. I usually drive it at 7, but I mean, that's a little of this or that. But I mean, we always at our house in Corona, we'll use the sunset as knowing what time of year it is, because we can watch which mountain range it's setting on. And so I think that, during a work commute, to be able to see a reflection of that is really a neat idea. I like it a lot.
Great.
Yeah. I wonder in time if, because right now that area has been bladed and there's nothing's growing there. So if, shrubs and things of the desert start coming in, will that affect the reflections of anything, or the sun is coming at such an angle it wouldn't interfere?
Well, Matthew, will you maybe address what's really planned there in terms of planting on that side, or nothing is planned and it'll be left?
Yeah, we're not doing any planting in that area. There would be a seed mix for the disturbed areas, but no plants will be installed in pots in the ground right there. I mean, who's to say if a mesquite tree won't eventually colonize it, but it's not in the plans to do anything like that.
Well, there's always something interesting about the unknowns around public art over time,
Yeah, and I think there is the opportunity it's a very active and interdependent community. There could be a transplant. If the mesquite tree starts to interfere, you could carry it to another spot lovingly.
And would you, I saw in some of the pictures you had a person standing there. Would you
Mhm.
build that structure to allow for pedestrians that are utilizing that multi-use path to walk around? Or is it going to stand alone?
I hadn't really gotten that far. I thought, what I did think is that we need to take up the grade. Let me go back to an image here. Because it sits on the side of the road and there's that shoulder there, I thought we need to take up the grade, and also it'd be nice to sort of anchor it into the hillside. So I had put these additional stones there, but certainly those could be placed in a way that made it pedestrian friendly. I was surprised to see in my site photo, there's a guy out there walking. And I thought, wow, I don't know where he came from or where he's going, but he's out for a walk for sure. I'd love to, I'd love to have that level of pedestrian interaction. So I'd like to plan for it if you think it's a good idea.
I think it will. That bike path is, I see it says that it's closed, but every weekend the bike riders are utilizing it,
Great.
3 or 4 at a time. Just I think to see what it's like out there, but to have a little stopping point besides the high school would be.
Mhm.
Yeah, it will. And that whole area is going to become developed. I mean, there's going to be an industrial area there. So there will be many more people utilizing that
Mhm.
path.
Okay, that sounds good.
I think the focus on being for the people that are commuting is I think ideal. I think that's the best focus, but I
Mhm.
think that you don't want to forget that there will be in the future pedestrians, and to create it in such a way that it would be protected, but also accessible if somebody wanted to go take a peek.
Yeah, great.
That people will want, I think they'll be curious and they will want to get better acquainted with the art. And I think the dynamic piece that it's changing in response to nature is going to encourage people to come at different times of day. So I really like that, in that it's got so many ways of engagement that it can engage the viewer.
Yeah, great. All right. So my thought would be is that the next steps are for us to work. We'll work with Tony and we'll make sure that we're 100% cleared for wherever we need to land. We'll completely nail down that site. And then we'll begin to work on the content. And my thought would be, and JJ, I did try to call your contact at Tohono O'odham, and I just, he does not have a voicemail that's set up, so I haven't gotten a person-to-person conversation with him yet. But we'll continue to collect content. And then what I think is that we ought to meet next month and we'll give you a more precise set of images for our solar projections. And, 100% open to receiving suggestions on that front. This is sort of new information today, and But if you have thoughts, seasonal thoughts or historical thoughts, because again, you know, December can be a month when something happened historically too, and that can take the form of an image.
I'm thinking about, and I'll reach out to Samuel Fayant again.
Yeah,
So this whole area, the whole Tucson Basin, they had a seasonal migratory route. And so at different times of the year, there would have been things that were special or sacred or essential to life in different parts of the Tucson Valley, this Tucson Basin. And so, you know, he would be able to share, you know, at the point in time where they were towards the Santa Rita Mountains, what time of year was that? And what were those special or those sacred things or that special animal or, you know, I think that might be really meaningful.
yeah, yep. I haven't given up.
No, don't give up.
No. I believe me, I know about the value of continued pursuit of that kind of information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Andy, what would your thoughts be on the eastern side of Houghton, like across from where this larger structure would be? Is that something that you would want to give us an idea on sooner than later, since you haven't?
Yeah, I think
crossed?
so. That's the other part, is we need to start to run some rough budget numbers and see what we have. Let me grab one more sketch. I had one of my earliest sketches. Okay, let me share this. Hang on a sec. So in one of my earliest sketches, you can see I just drew another formation across the road. So it may be as simple as something that sort of echoes these stones that are at the base of the sculpture, but they have a little bit more vertical presence. And, you know, a lot of that's just going to come down to how far our budget will stretch. When I originally drew it, and I don't have a sketch that I can pull up easily, but when I originally drew it, I had something on both sides of the road. And as Matthew noted, maybe a little too symmetrical there, but I was just dealing with that idea of a gateway. So I think, again, something asymmetrical and budget depending will sort of determine how elaborate we could get there. Cindy, do you think though that do you think that asymmetry works?
I think you'd almost have to go a little bit further north on the eastern side when you drive. It seems like, I think you have
Yeah,
to drive it a little bit more to see like the visual of where it would, but right across from itself, I'm not sure. The same
Yeah.
exact structure on both sides, I don't think so. I think what you're saying is building, like starting it on the eastern side as something smaller to see it on the western section.
yeah,
Even if you had some type of reflection that you were getting, the strongest one that you get with the sun on that side, on the southern section of it, a smaller section of that maybe to reflect something there. That would be, because I think that's a really great thing to see.
So one thing I'll do is I will look, Tony made those good videos of driving the curve. I'll
Yeah.
look at those because I I think your idea of staggering them in space is a really
Yes.
good idea. And so when we meet next month, I'll make some suggestions on that. And also, if you guys drive it and you're sort of ground truthing it, send me an email. Just let me know what you see, because that'll help me look at the videos more closely.
Well, and I agree with Cindy, and being offset, it's much more natural feeling, not
Mhm.
contrived.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that the direction you're going, it really puts people in touch with the natural world. And so I think too, that reinforces what Cindy said, is that, if it's offset, then it feels more natural.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I'm going to pause because we're almost to the magic hour here. One thing we had talked about was trying to connect with some of the others. I would still like to do that. I'd like to get as many folks to see it as possible. So Donna and I can work on that. But I would like to keep going. I would like to advocate to meet again in March.
Well, the second Monday in March, our usual time is 4 to 5 p.m. and I could send you all a reminder. And I will get in touch with the members of the panel who are not here, able to make it today, and see what we can do just to be sure that everyone's kind of up to the same level. So when Andy comes back in March, he's really building on, this presentation and moving forward. Cindy, yes.
Yeah, Donna. So the Vail School District is on spring break,
Okay.
the 6th and the 13th.
Do you want the following Monday, the third Monday then?
I think, definitely for Rob and for myself.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea, Donna.
JJ, would that be all right with you if it were the third Monday? Okay, I will make a note of that, and then that's the meeting notice that'll go out.
It may be to share with those that couldn't make it, is ask them to watch your recording of
I
today's meeting.
will send the link to the recording to all of you afterwards and suggest that as well. The thing about the recording is it's not always a visual, so I want to be sure that there's the opportunity for them to see what we can, and maybe I could send them a PDF or something. I'll talk to Andy. Andy, could you just stay on
Yes.
just for a minute after this so we can kind of just talk that through? But thank you for that suggestion, Cindy. I hope it helps. Sometimes it's hard listening to a recording without the visual. But we'll definitely look at the third Monday in March, since you're off on spring break. And Matthew, I hope that works for you as well. And Tony. So
That'll be good.
Thank you all for your time.
Yeah.
We could not do this process without you, and you really have given some great feedback. I've been taking notes as well as, with the recording. So I do appreciate your time this evening, and enjoy the evening. It's raining up here, so
That's good. That's a good thing. Rain
it is
in
a
the
good
desert.
thing. We need it. Yes. Okay.
All
Thanks.
right. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
See you next
Bye.
month.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Aiden, why don't you stay on with? Oh, he's gone.
Let me just stop the recording.
Okay.